Hi, this is János, it's Real World Audio with real cats. There's a second one here. Let me grab. Machi, Machi. Yeah. She's grabbing my socks. Ay. Okay. Here she is. Okay, she's Miss Velcro. She's using her claws to stick to anything, and it's really hard to remove her from any surface, but I managed to do it today. So SourcePoint 10. This is the continuation of my review. I mean, not review in the standard sense, but my sharing my thoughts about the design of the speaker, about its creation, and me thinking about what motivated Andrew Jones to come up with this design and what is the success of it. And I'm also going to share my critical thoughts about it, like what you could do different if you build it, and what would be the result of that. So what I was looking at it and where we left off at the previous part was the what is called the twin drive system. So that's how he calls uh, the motor of the driver. So basically, he created this coaxial driver by coupling the magnets of the tweeter and the woofer so that they work together and they don't fight each other. And I think that's a truly brilliant concept to harmonize, to synchronize the working of these two engines that propel the loudspeaker. And I think he was really successful with it, and he really uh, set an example here and really raised the bar for Tannoy and Fine Audio. And I think for Tannoy, they will be left in the dark because all their engineering team, the brain, has left and created Fine Audio, and they are focusing only on how to save the penny on the pound. I don't know. So I think you won't be seeing big invention from Tannoy's side unless they steal the ideas from Andrew Jones and Fine Audio. Uh, but I think Fine Audio will probably catch up with it and think about what Andrew Jones did, and hope if Andrew Jones has patented his ideas, then he is secure. If not, then probably Fine Audio can catch up too. And why am I saying Fine Audio can catch up? It's because uh, both with Fine Audio and Tannoy, there is a mid-range issue coming up because of this concentric drive system. So you have the tweeter in the center, and that's using the woofer as a waveguide. So that's an ingenious problem because you have a point source, so the two are radiating from the same source, and that's fabulous for imaging, and fabulous because both have the same dispersion pattern, so it has a very uniform sound in your room, and it works really perfectly in case only one of the two drivers needs to work. So for example, if you have like a double bass, the deep note like and the tweeter doesn't need to add anything or any really high energies, then in that case the only sound is generated by the woofer and it will be nice and clean. But if you have the bass getting crazy, and it's not just a single double bass, but like maybe you have drums and maybe a church organ playing, so you are really pumping the cone, and it has a cone movement. And then what it will do, it will add Doppler effect to the high frequencies. And at the same time, there's a flute playing or maybe a trumpet playing, then the sound of the trumpet, those high frequencies, will be modulated by the bass. And when I was listening to the sound demo with Andrew Jones, when you look where he has that demo with that modern sound, that there's like a bass thumping and the lady singing, and then you can hear that and then he mentions after that that was really serious SPR. there you can hear that the voice is getting like a metallic and shrill and unnatural, and that's because of the Doppler effect that's created by the large cone movements from the bass. And if you turn down the volume there so that the Doppler is much less with the bass, then that shrillness will shrink with it. And this is happening with all of these designs that have these concentric drivers. But I can tell you guys that when comparing Tannoy, Fine Audio, and Andrew Jones's SP10, Andrew Jones's has the least of this distortion. So he has integrated his tweeter with the woofer the best of the three. But I'm just judging this on these sound samples I heard from here. So maybe if I would hear more, or if I would hear it live, I might form a different idea. But judging not just from that, but from the tonality of the material presented, even played at low volume, the tonality is much more even with the SP10 than what I'm hearing from Tannoy and Fine Audio. So I think his twin drive that he has created and how he integrated the tweeter with the cone is really, really extremely well done. And I think it's not just the twin drive that's the success of it, but also the plie surround and the way that it's seamlessly integrated to the buffer front. So those are really big things. So I think the key to these loudspeakers is the driver itself. Now, what else? Let's look at the insides. So I'm looking at my computer. Now you can look at my computer too. So here are the innards of the loudspeaker, and as you can see, this is a quite spacious loudspeaker with 50 liters of free air volume. I think that's what he said. And the cabinet material, you see, it's made out of MDF. I would personally, when I build a loudspeaker, I would never ever touch MDF, but as a loudspeaker designer, if you want to make a commercial product, you virtually have no other choice but to use MDF. You can't use anything else. For two reasons: price and availability and reproducibility. 3 reasons. Yeah. You can see I'm a mathematician. there are 3 types of mathematician. One who can count and the other who can't. so those reasons, right? And so here he is using MDF because he has to. If he wants to sell more than 1 pair of speakers, he has to like manufacture more of them. The only way to reach consistency basically is to use MDF, which you can buy ad libitum and get the same thing. If you use a plywood, then you will run into supply issues. That's why you cannot use it, even though it would be massively superior sound-wise to MDF. And if you use real wood, which would be even better than MDF, than plywood, that's just plain impossible to use, because price would be just insane and availability is next to none. So if you use a loudspeaker, let's say you build it from instrument grade spruce, that would be of the highest quality, that would be a cost no object creation, but then you would maybe be able to build maybe like 5 pairs of it or 10 pairs, and that's it, because that's how much supply there is. You can't do any greater production run, and then you can't run a company with 10 pairs of speakers, right? So your only choice is MDF. If you would use like plywood, maybe you could use like 100 pairs out of it, but and then more than that you would run into supply issues. So the only way to mass produce loudspeaker cabinet is with MDF, and you will get it much cheaper. So if he would have done it with plywood, it would be even better, but then it wouldn't be 3,000, what is it, 500, 3,600, something like that for the pair of them, but it would be maybe like 5,000. So when a company thinks about decisions, they also may have to think about, can I sell it? Will it be a viable product? Or will the company die if I make the wrong choice? So the difference is actually not that big between building it with MDF or plywood. For the average user, if you have an average amplifier that an average person has, then the difference between ply and MDF will not be that big. If you are a crazy dude like me and you have really specialized loudspeakers, I mean amplifiers that work with loudspeakers to drive them like music instruments, then yes, the difference is quite big. But also it depends on your music material. If you are listening primarily to jazz or pop, you might not even notice it. But if you listen to classical music, you listen to acoustic instruments that have wooden body, like violin, guitar, piano. So anything that has high quality wood in it, if you have a cabinet made of MDF or plywood, the difference between them in tonality will be massive, absolutely massive, provided you have an amplifier that is capable to deliver the goods. And that's not true for 99% of amplifiers in the commercial market. So why bother with such expenses, right? As a company, you either make the right choices or you die. And so Andrew Jones here, even though his goal was to make a no compromise solution, he still had to work with the compromises that people have and their systems has. So he has to sell it to you, and now the people I'm making my channel to are those who want to step further, to step up from that game that goes for the lowest common denominator. So like I don't want to make you the king of the swamp. I want you to build your house on a solid land. Okay? You can't build a castle on a swamp, like in Monty Python. We build it on a bloody swamp. Yeah. So coming back here, that's one thing, and he is trying to get around this solution by making the front baffle 2-inch thick MDF. And and why is that? Because he wants to deaden it more and more, because the more dead it is, the least you hear that ugly, nasty MDF crappy sound. So with 2-inch thick MDF front baffle, he is really taking it a step further so that it interferes less, much less than the average Joe cabinet. So he gets a thumbs up for that. And also he is doing these internal bracing structures to make the cabinet even more dead, to make sure that that MDF cabinet contributes even less to the sound. And what he has done, look at these open panels inside the cabinet, 2 of them, and you see they have these 2 windows. So there's a window in the upstairs window and downstairs window. And why is that so? Why is he doing that? He is doing that because he is channeling the pressure waves on the inside of the cabinet. So when you have a generic speaker and you have a driver in it, and then the sound waves, the pressure waves just bounce all kinds up and down everywhere, back and forth, and they excite the cabinet, so the cabinet is pumping more, and you hear that ugly MDF sound more and more. So the way he minimized that, one, by using a very thick front plate, using internal braces, and he has designed the interior in an acoustic way, so to create an acoustic channel, actually 2 channels inside the cabinet, so to divide the pressure wave into 2 lanes. So you have the upstairs lane up here and the downstairs lane down there. and the upstairs lane is feeding the port in the upstairs, and the downstairs lane is feeding the port downstairs. And that's why he's using these two ports and the double window systems. And let me just put this down and grab my pen and pencil to draw it. So let me see, will this be a successful demonstration or not? I don't know, but my drawing skills are pretty abysmal, but I'm trying to do the best I can here. So I'm trying to draw the driver. It's a very poor way of me drawing the driver, but imagine this is the driver and that's the back of the driver. So we have here the body, which is the magnet, and all the structure here, and there is a basket that's supporting the driver. So that's, imagine this is the back side of the driver. So basically it means that the back pressure from your driver cannot exit where it is, cannot exit your driver, where you have the motor structure itself and the support elements, the braces here that hold the motor to the basket. And he is using that structure. So when you have the double windows, like a window up and a window down, they are arranged in such a fashion that the upstairs window can channel that pressure that exits here, and the lower window channels that pressure that exits from the lower side, the back side of the driver. And the middle part, that is the wood in between the two elements, that's where the support elements of the drivers are. So there is no pressure coming from there. So it's really ingeniously done that he is funneling the back pressure through these two windows. And this acts as basically as an impedance to the air pressure, and where it has the support element, the active part of the material, that's where the pressure is low, and where the windows are, these octagonal windows are, that's where the pressure is high, that's where the air is exiting and going through these two layers of these windows. So there's one set of windows, and then there's another set of windows behind the driver, and then finally we have the two ports. So it's ingenious, and that's why the ports work well, because they have the airflow funneled towards them, and it can breathe back and forth, and that's why there is no big issues with the cabinet resonances, because the energy is free to travel, funneled into the ports and back from the ports. This is really ingenious. And the two ports work much better because of one. Because if you have one port, let's say here you have the two ports, so you have 50% of the energy coming here, 50% there. Actually less than that. There's like some percent of the energy, maybe like 10%, 20%, that is bounced back from the support elements in the lower side, middle, back side. So there you are going to get turbulence inside the cabinet, but the energy of that is not that much, because the majority of the passages is open, and that's why the majority of the pressure is free to shuttle between the backside of the driver cone and the ports. If he had only one port, what would happen in that case? So in that case, even if we have this double window solution, but let's cross out the lower port, then what would happen is that the pressure wave that's traveling in the lower section, it will have to rise up. So all the air, it have to move up to the upper port, and that creates turbulence. And that's why we are getting problems. And when people try to understand this by mathematical modeling, like if we do this, then like opposite phase and cancellations, and we create like quarter wave, blah 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 blah. Yes, that's a great way of thinking it, like creating a mathematical model, but that's still approximating reality. And the way I'm thinking about that is not to create mathematical abstractions, but I envision what's happening inside the loudspeaker cabinet or in the front of it, as if I was watching a wind turbine when they're testing the jet engines, and how the turbulences are that are caused by the individual elements and how the wind travels. So if we have like dust particles dispersed in the air, what is their path? Because if they're not flowing straight, then the turbulence takes away from the energy of the flow. And if you optimize the flow, then the energy can exit through your port and is transferred into your room. So you always want to transfer the energy to your room, either through the front of the cone directly to your room, and through the energy exiting through the port, and whatever energy is bouncing between the sides, you want that energy to also exit to the room instead of being stifled there and just bouncing around, because the more it bounces around, the more it will alter the sound. The faster the energy can be released, the least alterations it will suffer. And by employing two ports, you make sure that the part of the energy that's in the upper side of the cabinet can move freely, and the energy that's in the lower side can move freely. And why is that important? That's important because the loudspeaker is shaped like that. So it's not a circle, but it's like a brick. And when you have a circular driver in front, okay, let's take one step back. So when I have a circular driver, if I stick a tube behind it, so my chassis is a tube, that's when the back pressure can shuttle, can exit without turbulence, without alterations. And that's what would give you the cleanest output for the back pressure. Now we would run into a problem if you have a tube shape chassis cabinet, then that will create artifacts by causing like certain cancellations, those effects that are associated with transmission lines. So when you have a void pipe at the base response, you have frequencies falling out because of cancellations in a tube. So even a tube is not perfect. In some aspects it has also failings, but where it is really efficient, that it can transmit all the energy out because there is no extra turbulence created inside the tube. So once we are taking away that tube shape and molding it into into a taller thing that is much taller than the tube, then you will have the air migrating from behind the cone to up and low into these two directions. So the back pressure wants to separate up and down, and that's why it's a stroke of genius to put in the back a port up and a port down, because that's where the air wants to flow. And what he is doing is he is following the natural path of the air, where the air wants to go. And that's why he gets 2 or thumbs from me. He would get more if I would have more thumbs, but it's really the creation of a brilliant mind. So, I'm already at 24 minutes. So anyway, the way he designed how the cabinet works is really, really top notch. And when he's saying that he's put in 40 years of experience into it and thinking, I really hats off. He's done a really fantastic job. When looking at loudspeakers lately in the past 5+ years, I haven't seen anything impressive really at all. That was done in the last 5-10 years, really nothing. But this is something that I was like, wow, this is the product of a brilliant mind. So I never met Andrew Jones, but you know, just hats off. It's stroke of genius. I really love what you have created here. And if I would have done it, one of my comments would be to build it with plywood, Baltic birch plywood or something like that. And with those, the plywood has double the strength of MDF. So if you want to create it to the same dampening status as this cabinet is, then you need to use half the thickness of plywood to have an equivalent type of cabinet as we have here, just with a somewhat nicer resonance pattern. So if you want to build something on your own, I would recommend going for MDF. I think Andrew Jones, if he would build a pair for himself, he would also have gone with plywood, but because this is a commercial speaker and he had to think to create something that can be sold in quantity, he had no other choice but make it out of MDF, and not that 99% of you will notice the difference. And by the way, you would only notice it if you also had a pair made with plywood. Only then. But that's the general rule, that if you have a speaker made with MDF that is made by a brilliant mind who really thought out the principle and to a high level of thinking and execution, it will be a much better speaker than something made with plywood but without the know-how. So that's another thing. So when you think about cabinet materials and loudspeaker executions, you also need to think about like kind of like the cabinet material is the canvas, and what you do with it is like who is doing the drawing. So is it Picasso or maybe the butcher? So that's another thing as well. And of course Picasso can do something much better on a better canvas, but you give the better canvas to a butcher, he will just butcher it, right? So anyway, 27 minutes, and I still haven't gotten to the port issue. That I think the ports are done here superbly, because even though they are the plastic poopers that I really hate, you would never catch me alive building speakers with these, but they have the flair on both ends. That is something that saves them and makes them as a valid source for almost everyone, and makes much of what they do inaudible. However, I think it is possible to improve on it, and the improvement is not gigantic, but that would require quite a bit of redesign of the loudspeaker. And if it's an MDF cabinet, then going slotted on this would not offer much of a benefit. And by the way, two circular ports do mimic a slot port to a certain degree, and that's why they work much better than a single plastic port. So if you think about it, let me just draw it here. So let me just draw the back of two loudspeakers, loudspeaker A and loudspeaker B. Loudspeaker A has a single circular port, so then the air will commute through that, so it has to shrink that down into a single hole, crawl into the cabinet and be expelled through that single hole. When you have two ports like this, then the air in your room is funneled through both of them and then expelled through both of them. So basically the air that's hitting the upper side of the cabinet is funneled like this. So those are the directions, right? And the air is funneled like that. So there are two focal points. so the change is not that drastic. But when you have a single port, then the change is this drastic. So all the air that's coming from up here, that's hitting that side of the panel, has to get funneled down here. So I think that was a really bad explanation. Let me explain it in another way. This is kind of like, have you heard of astronomy, of interferometry? When you have when you have a single telescope, and that is like here, and let's say you have this size single telescope, then that has the resolving power for the sky as a telescope of this size. But you take two of these telescopes of the same size, place them this distance, then the resolving power of the telescopes becomes equivalent to a single mirror that is the diameter as the distance between the two, and it's called an interferometer telescope. And the same thing works in the acoustic domain too. So we are creating an interferometer port, which is roughly equivalent to the slot port of this length, because the air needs to get funneled down to a size, to a length that corresponds to the distance between the two extremes of the port. And so basically, by utilizing two ports, we are creating the interferometer equivalent of the astronomers' telescopes in the audio world. So thank you for tuning in. 2 thumbs up for the execution and the idea behind it. I think it's absolutely brilliant. Thank you, Andrew Jones. Bye bye.